And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Thursday, August 15th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys that we did qualify for Super Chats. So to make the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, you could hit the little $ in the chat menu, and that will highlight your comment during the live broadcast. I will acknowledge it during the broadcast, and it just makes the show better. We appreciate you guys tuning in and day out, and that's just one way to help out the show. Along with that, you could still use the link, which is GSMCPodcast.net, which is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment. But Super Chat is easier because you don't leave the video. You could help out the show while you're still watching it as opposed to clicking on the link and going to a separate site. So just wanted to remind you guys about that. Now, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we are going to start off the show. We're going to talk about J.J.McCarthy. So he's officially going to be out for the entire season with the torn meniscus. He did undergo surgery on that injury, and he will be out for the entire season, which is a devastating blow because, whether you thought he was going to be good or not this season, we wanted to see him play. So we're going to talk about that. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about a blockbuster trade. So the Patriots, they've been dealing with contract dispute with Matthew Judon, arguably their best defensive player, and they ended up trading him to the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about episode 2 of Hard Knocks with the Bears. I'll talk about Caleb Williams' preseason debut. Then in the fourth part of the show, we will talk about the AFC East. Will rank the wide receiver groups within that division. And then in the final part of the show, I'll get into talking about the preseason game tonight between the Eagles and the Patriots. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about J.J. McCarthy's injury. So I know I discussed it yesterday, so he was dealing with knee soreness, and it was determined that he did have a torn meniscus. Now, we didn't exactly know what when I did the show yesterday, we didn't exactly know what the timeline of the recovery was going to be, whether he was going to get the trimming or get the full surgery. And it turns out that he is indeed going to be out for the entire season. He got the full surgery. He had it yesterday. And, yeah, he is going to be out. So, with that being said now, Sam Darnold is going to be the starter moving forward. And the other quarterbacks that they have on the team, you have Sam Darnold, you have Nick Mullins, who started some games last year for the Vikings, and you also have Jaron Hall, who made some starts last year as well. And there was that one game against against the Packers where he did start, and it was kind of curious how the Vikings handled it, because he started the game and then the Vikings fell behind and they ended up switching over to Nick Mullins when the game was out of reach. Now, does that mean that the Vikings would have won the game? Probably not, because the Packers were playing really well at the time, but it was still kind of a curious decision on Kevin O'Connell's part as to why they started Jaron Hall in the first place. But this is a devastating blow for the Vikings. Now, was this the right thing? Yeah, to get the full surgery, take the recovery time and come back strong next year. But, as much as, people may say, like, oh, J.J. McCarthy wasn't going to be good, and you still wanted to see him play. He wanted to have that opportunity to see what he could do because eventually he was going to take over for Sam Darnold. But that just ended up not happening. And now we kind of have to, wait a whole year for, him to recover and come back. And now, were the Vikings, were they destined to be, one of the best teams in the NFL this year? I don't think. No, they weren't. Now, do they have a good roster? Yeah, they do. But how this team was set up this year, it was really just, let's see how J.J. McCarthy does and we go from there. Now, obviously, Sam Darnold was going to start the year, and I guess depending on how the season was going to go, then J.J. McCarthy would have taken over, but now this is going to be Sam Darnold's team. And Sam Darnold, for what he is as a quarterback, I mean, he's going to be a backup, for the rest of his career, most likely. I mean, can this be an opportunity where, he plays well, wins games for the Vikings, and maybe a team that needs a quarterback gives him a shot to be a starter again? Because, we did see what he did in Carolina those first few games of the season when he was their starter, and people thought, wow, look at Sam Darnold on the Panthers now. But that all changed pretty quickly. And, spent some time with the 49ers, was Brock Purdy's backup last year, and now he's with the Vikings. Now, he's in a good situation with the Vikings, but, Sam Darnold is what he is. He's not a franchise quarterback. He's going to be, he's going to be the starter this year, and we'll see how he does. But, he is what he is at this point in his career. And, again, it's just an unfortunate thing that had to happen. Because, again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, I was leaning one way or another. I didn't really watch a ton of games with Michigan. I just know from watching the national championship game and, from hearing all around that, yeah, he was a guy that J.J. McCarthy that handed the ball off a lot. But that was just how good Michigan's running game was, because what did they run for? Over 250 yards in the national championship game? So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But, and then the preseason debut was a mixed bag. Throws an interception, but did throw a couple of touchdowns. Looked decent. That's really all we got from him this year. Now, it was a preseason game. Got to see how he does in an actual game, but we got to wait. And one thing that people were talking about yesterday is just how, the Vikings, they just can't seem to get it right at quarterback. Now, that doesn't mean J.J. McCarthy's not the answer with this injury, but I mean in terms of just there's always something that ends up happening. They haven't been able to find, more so they haven't been able to find stability at the quarterback position. They had Kirk Cousins for a few years, but now he's gone. Before that, you're going through guys like Case Keenum, who was part of the Minneapolis Miracle. You had Sam Bradford, Christian Ponder, Teddy Bridgewater, who got hurt. He had his knee injury that kept him out, and then he ended up being, a journeyman quarterback the rest of his career. Now he retired recently. And it's just it's quarterback carousel, really. And I feel like I'm trying to, am I forgetting anybody else? Well, and then before Christian Ponder, you had, Brett Favre, and I think Tavares Jackson was on the Vikings as well. It's just been it's been a cycle for the Vikings. And now this year, last year, look at what happened last year when Kirk Cousins got hurt. You had Josh Dobbs, Jaron Hall, Nick Mullins. Now it's the same thing. Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall. Those are your quarterbacks moving forward. Now, could the Vikings go out and trade for a quarterback? Maybe. I think it all depends on, where they're at, maybe. Because maybe they're hovering around 500. Sam Darnold's not, playing the best. Maybe they just bring in another backup quarterback. I don't know. They're not going to find. They traded for Josh Dobbs last year, and it looked like, wow, Josh Dobbs and the Vikings, they could make the playoffs, and then that just ended up not happening. So they're going to ride it out with Darnold. They're probably going to ride it out with what they have on the roster. Maybe Jaren Hall in year 2, is a little better than last year, because when he did start, he wasn't very good. So, who knows? But Sam Darnold is going to be the starter moving forward, and yeah, it stinks. And you guys know me and how I feel about injuries, so, and we all feel the same way about injuries. It's just, it stinks. And, we're not going to get an opportunity to see him play, what he can do this year. We're going to have to wait. But I think this does hurt a little bit, just because, you're missing your entire rookie season. You're looked at as the franchise guy, but you're not going to be playing at all. Now, if he was healthy, maybe he sat the whole year. But it's different because you're not hurt. Now you're hurt, and now you got to go through rehab and trying to get yourself back. That's going to that's gonna hurt him a little bit. So we'll have to wait, but wish nothing but the best for J.J. McCarthy. Hopefully he comes back strong next year, and we get to see what he could do. So, but that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think about the impact of this injury for the Vikings. How do you see Sam Darnold performing in 2024? So I will definitely see him play week 1 against the Giants when I go. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully the Giants win, though. But we're going to take our first break of the show here. When we come back, we will talk about the trade that was made yesterday, the Falcons getting Matthew Judon from the Patriots. I'll talk about the impact of that. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.